A nation with no borders, no language, no culture, and no representation. That's the warning about America's future in the new book, Government Zero. Its author, Michael Savage, is my guest on this edition of Politicking. Welcome to Politicking. I'm Larry King, and Michael Savage is a New York Times best-selling author, host of The Savage Nation, one of the most listened-to radio talk shows in America. His new book entitled, right here, Government Zero, No Borders, No Language, No Culture. We're going to get right into what that title means as he joins me from San Francisco. All right, what do you mean, no borders, no language, no culture?
Well, Larry, let's look at what's going on with our border with Mexico. There's virtually no enforcement. Every nation, as you know, is defined by a few things. It's logical. From the beginning of recorded history, a nation was defined by its borders. We have an administration committed to erasing the border with Mexico so that there could be a migrant surge into this country, which has been going on for quite a while. And look at what's going on in Europe as a result of the open borders policy. Finally, the geniuses who are running the European nations woke up to, wait a minute, they're like army ants invading our nation. How can we take care of all of them? So finally, they're putting in border controls. So borders, we need to reassert our borders, Larry. Language, isn't it common sense, going back to Roman times, that a nation divided cannot stand? How many languages can a nation speak officially now? I don't mean ethnic neighborhoods. I grew up in New York, Larry. Chinese neighborhoods, Jewish neighborhoods, Italian neighborhoods, Romanian. They spoke their own languages. But the glue that held us together in the melting pot of New York was English. My grandfather, who was an immigrant, my father was an immigrant, by the way. People think I'm anti-immigrant. I'm an immigrant son. Said, learn English. You want to make a life for yourself, learn the language of the land. Now they teach every language in a school. And Larry, the ballots are in 7 languages or 10 languages in San Francisco. How can a nation be cohesive without a common language? Now you say culture. What do I mean by culture? Everyone says, what do you mean by culture? What are you, all Christians? There's a common culture in America. It's common law. The U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, based upon the Magna Carta that the English gave us, common English law. Even that's dissolving. Look at what I mean by that. Free speech, where? Where in America is there really free speech? We have it now, Larry, you and I. We could say almost anything within certain parameters. But look at our universities, Larry. They don't let people pray. They don't let them talk. Everyone's jumping down everyone's throat. You and I may disagree politically, but we are free to speak our minds. You couldn't do that today in a college campus.
But there's no law that says you have to speak a language. And my parents, my father came from Austria, my mother came from Russia. I'm a first-generation American. My mother wasn't required to speak English. She learned it, but she wasn't required. You don't want a law that says you have to.
No, not at all. But all official documents should be in the English language, including the voting ballot. In your father's time, was there a voting ballot in Russian and English and Italian? There wasn't.
No, but we have so many Latino immigrants. There's so much. Latino is going to be the dominant culture in America.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want your children to speak Spanish? I mean, it's crazy
why
if you
wouldn't they
want them to.
No. Why wouldn't they want their children to speak English is the question.
They do take both in all schools.
Well, but the land is an English-speaking land. The migrants, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, Larry. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Respect the culture you are migrating to. Don't tell the culture you're migrating to become like us. I have nothing against Spanish people. I studied Spanish for 7 years. I can speak it. Not well, but I can read it. I can speak it. I read the literature. English is the official language of the nation. At least it should be in my mind.
But it's not.
Well, it isn't. It should be.
What's your fear?
I have no fear.
Well, all right. So what if more Americans spoke Spanish? What's your fear? We're a nation of immigrants.
I have no fear, but I don't want to live in Mexico. Why are they coming to my country?
Why did our parents come to this country?
For a better life.
Right.
Okay. So with a better life, what you do is you adapt and you assimilate instead of being accommodated. This is the problem, Larry. In our parents' generation, they assimilated to American culture. They assimilated to American mores. Now we accommodate everyone who comes in and say, well, we have to accommodate them. I say the melting pot means the melting pot.
All right, so what do you want from government zero? What do you?
How about a government-
Michael Savage is running things. What do you want?
God forbid. I don't want to run things. I'm the architect of how things should be run. I'm not the builder, nor am I the contractor. I'm the architect. But Larry, I would make it a little more patriotic. I certainly would do a nationalist platform. And I know that's anathema to the left. The word nationalism scares them because the minute you say nationalism, people think Hitler. That's immediately the left.
Well, he was a nationalist country, yes. Government over alles.
Right. So now we have the reverse of nationalism, which is internationalism, which is a form of invasion unto itself. Example. Merkel opens her borders in Germany. You're an international show, right? Merkel opens her borders in Germany. What's happening in Germany? And I made this point last week in the radio show. It was very controversial, Larry. While Hitler, and I'll use him as an example because he was such an evil maniac, and we all know he was an evil maniac, he wanted to impose his Germanic Nazi doctrines on surrounding nations and conquer them. We know that's crazy. What is Merkel doing? She's invading her own country with, in this case, Syrian Muslims, mainly men of military age. Why? What is she doing to her own nation? We all have compassion for immigrants. I'm an immigrant son. But when the lifeboat is full and you take in too many people, the boat sinks.
So you want to close borders forever? What do you want to do?
Well, I think we should have a national discussion as to which immigrants this nation wants. We can't just have open borders and let everyone pour in. Larry, what percentage of immigrants are receiving some form of government benefits? I know the answers. It's a very high percentage. People say they all come here to work. Larry, I'm not blind. I go past construction sites. I see the men who are breaking their backs till 8 o'clock at night. I talk to them. I see them hauling the cement up the steps. They're all from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador. They're the hardest working people in the world. I see that. I understand that. But what percentage of immigrants are not working? Very high, over 55%. What percent are on some form of assistance? Very high, much higher than you would believe. The country can't afford it. Larry, we're printing money. We're printing money. We're not providing the money from nowhere. And so we're debasing the value of the dollar. That's why there's such hyperinflation, by the way, of real estate. People say, well, where's the inflation if we're just printing money? I happen to know economics, Larry. I have a house in LA. I know economics. The thing is, real estate's out of control. It's a true reflection of the actual value of the dollar, which has been sinking.
More with Michael Savage after this. So do you advocate in this, you close the borders completely for 7 years?
How many more people can we absorb? How many can we take it? No one knows.
There's a lot of territory. It's wide open every time I fly across America.
Well, Donald Trump says he wants to build a wall. He's built skyscrapers. He can build a wall. At least then we can control who's coming in and who's going out. By the way, amongst the so-called Latinos, who are really Hispanics, Latino is a political phrase. It's actually insulting. Amongst the Hispanic folks who are coming from the south of the border, Larry, how many are Middle Easterners? You ask the Border Patrol, see if this is right-wing insanity. They're finding prayer rugs. They're finding Korans. There are many, many Middle Easterners who've come over that border, shaving their beards to look like Mexicans. Larry, this is a serious problem. Even the FBI director says it's a problem. And every time he says it, he's hushed up. He says there are ISIS members in all 50 states recruiting all the time. What kind of nation can survive with this kind of weakness, Larry?
Okay, let's get into a lot of areas. You've always written best-selling books. Government Zero is the newest. Let's get into other areas. You're critical of Pope Francis. You're saying he's a political operative rather than a spiritual leader. What do you mean? Christ was a political operative then.
Well, let's deal with the Pope, then we'll deal with Jesus, okay? I have no problem with Jesus. He was a good Jewish rabbi. But the thing is, Larry, the Pope comes here, and a good portion of his encyclicals were about the environment. The Pope knows as much about the climate as this way. Let's put it this way. When it rains, his assistants hold up an umbrella. That's his knowledge of climatology. And
that's your knowledge and my knowledge.
No,
but we depend on. You're not a scientist, Michael.
Yes, I am. I have a doctorate from the University of California at Berkeley in epidemiology and nutrition. I'm a real PhD.
You know more about the climate than scientists.
I know more about the climate than the Pope, who we are discussing.
How do you
And
know what he's read?
Well, you say scientists. Let's talk about scientists. You keep hearing from the liar in the White House. 98% of all scientists agree.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the 2% who don't agree. I want to hear about the dissenters. I want to see their evidence. They don't let you see that, do they? There's a lot of dissenting science, Larry, but you never see it. There is so much money involved in the global warming scam that you never hear the other
Michael,
side.
you don't believe in climate change? You think climate change is not real?
No, it's not real.
Michael, look around you.
Well, Larry, where's the climate change? Show me the climate change.
Okay, the heat has gone up 1% every 5 years.
No, it has not. As a matter of fact, we're in a cooling phase.
All right,
we're in
Michael,
a cooling phase, not a heating phase, Larry.
You go with the 2%, I'll go with 98.
Okay, let me give you a fact, which you learned in elementary school, and all your listeners learned in elementary school. How many ice ages occurred on this earth over the eons? At least 7. Ice age warming, right? We know that.
And they were all climate changes.
Yes.
Right.
But it was before industrialization that we had the melting of ice and a retreating of the ice. I'm not arguing for pollution, Larry. I've spent years collecting plants, working to save the environment. I give hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to save animals, to save the environment, things like that. So I'm the opposite of what you may portray me as. I'm not sitting here saying pollute, 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 but I believe in science. So let's go back to the Pope. I'll give you one fact. Everyone listening to the show, if they Google one word, Vostok ice core samples, V-O-S-T-O-K. Vostok is a region in the Antarctic. It was an international team, 5 nations. They drilled down, I think, 10 miles into the ice, 10 miles into the ice, and they pulled up an ice core sample. And what did they find? They found evidence of cooling and heating and cooling and heating and cooling and heating going back millions of years. This is not to argue we shouldn't clean up the environment. I've been working at it for 50 years, but not through lies and not through fear tactics. Remember, it was acid rain? Remember that 30 years ago? We were all going to die from acid rain. Whatever happened to that? Every 10 years, there's another scare tactic.
So the Pope is entitled to his opinion as Michael is entitled to his, right?
Pope doesn't know science. Ask the Pope the next time you see him over a bagel if he knows what the Vostok ice core sample shows. It's not an opinion, Larry. In my book, Government Zero, I actually show evidence to the contrary, the 2%ers who disagree. And by the way, what the Pope is doing is very dangerous.
Why?
Because he brought politics to religion. We're supposed to have a separation of church and state in this country.
We'll be right back with more of Michael Savage. His book is Government Zero. Don't go away. Welcome back to Politicking. We're talking with Michael Savage, best-selling author, political commentator, host of The Savage Nation. His radio show is heard on 225 stations across the continent. His latest book is Government Zero. No Borders, No Language, No Culture is out now. It's also available in hardcover or on download. So let's get to some more politics. Donald Trump was here recently. You've had Trump on your show. You say the establishment doesn't want Trump. Define who's the... Do you want Trump, by the way?
I'm a big supporter of Trump. I'm on record. And you want the main reason?
Yeah.
Businessman who knows how to run businesses.
Why does that make you know how to run government? Herbert Hoover was a businessman. Jimmy Carter was a businessman.
Jimmy Carter was a horrible president because his politics...
Herbert Hoover was good.
Hoover was actually a genius. He was an engineer. You know, he was an engineer.
I know he was an engineer, but
and
he was a
good
businessman.
You know, he designed the Brooklyn Bridge.
I know, but why do businessmen make great leaders of politicians?
They don't necessarily.
They're in the profit business.
Then they don't necessarily make great leaders, but combined with his love of the military and his love of America and his decency as a man, Trump is the best candidate, in my opinion. And I have to reiterate, I rank candidates on very few topics. The number one thing is national security. Obama gets less than 0 on national security. He has debased the military. He's decapitated the military. We can't even fight a war on one front, let alone 2 fronts. It took Russia, God bless Putin, to go into Syria to get the United States to conduct one decent raid against the ISIS maniacs. Larry, let's be real here. If ISIS is not stopped, Larry, the whole world could fall under the sword. This is a terrible situation. How come Putin knows that and our government doesn't?
All right, so what do you want a militaristic government?
Well, now you're jumping to an. I didn't ask
Well,
for.
you said that you want to. Your number one reason is the military.
I want a government that respects the military, funds the military, supports the military, but more importantly, has a commander in chief who can command the military instead of undermining the military. And I think Trump is the most supportive of American military policy.
What do you make of the fact that Ben Carson has overtaken him in the polls?
If the poll is true, and we all know, Larry, you're in the business longer than I am, polls come and go. He beat him where, in Iowa? Iowa's a very evangelical state. They like Ben Carson because he's more religious than Donald Trump. But nationally, I think the polls don't show that Carson overtook him.
Do you think that, as the GOP has contended, that the moderators, and we can have doubt about them, were unfair?
Well, last week's debacle by CNBC was a giveaway. Even the most, I would say, neutral liberal would look at that and say it was laughable. Look at what they threw at them. What's your most embarrassing moment, blah, blah, blah.
I know, it's a joke.
Have they ever asked Hillary Clinton about her most embarrassing moments? They crucified these guys. They tried to crucify them on the stage. It was sickening. That wasn't the media, Larry. That was a biased kangaroo court. It was a trial. And Larry, you know what I came up with last night in bed? I laid in bed thinking, last week when I was in bed after the debate, I said the CNBC moderators grilled the Republicans harder than the Republicans grilled Hillary during the Benghazi hearings. How's that for fairness in the media?
But you will admit, as a loyal conservative, that this Republican group has at times been embarrassing.
Not to me. There's some of them I don't care for. I think that they're not really that great. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Rubio. I think Rubio is a young pup. Look, what do you need to know about Rubio? I don't want to knock any of them. The thing is that any one of them would be a better president than Hillary Clinton. We know what we're going to get from Hillary. We had 8 years of the Clinton presidency. Isn't the nation entitled?
That was a bad presidency.
I knew you were going to say it. I gave you a softball. Yes. I knew you were going to.
Clinton was a bad president.
You're going to say it was great because the economy was good, right?
No, not just that. He was a pretty balanced president. How many men did we lose in his watch? Who did he invade where we lost 4,000 people?
Let's go. I'm not supporting Bush. Don't get me wrong. I was one of the biggest critics of Bush. So don't put me in that category of being a Republican. I'm not. I'm an independent. But let's look at old Bill Clinton. How is it that the Chinese now are advancing us in space warfare, space technology? How could they do that? You know, when Clinton came to office, the Chinese were trying to launch rockets to launch satellites. They couldn't do it. The rockets were crashing on the pads. And there was a guy who ran the DNC, the biggest donor to the Democrat National Committee under Bill Clinton. I forget his name. He started with a parking meter company in the Bronx. I can remember it in a minute, Shapiro or Schwartz. Bernie Schwartz was the chairman of the DNC. Bernie Schwartz built a company called Aral Space and Technology, Larry. And Bernie got all of that research from the government for free. He then shared it with the Chinese, telling America, don't worry, they'll never use their ability to launch rockets in a military fashion. Well, they did. Larry, there was a lot of bad things that happened that people don't know about. It got swept under the rug. We have to look under the surface, not just at the surface.
So this is Clinton's fault?
Well, he and Bernie were the biggest of friends. He had him to the White House as many times as Obama's had Al Sharpton in the White House.
Okay. If Trump doesn't get the nomination, who would you like to get it?
Well, who could win is the question.
Who could win? Well, it's all going to be Florida and Ohio anyway, right?
There you go. Well, yeah, there we go again.
I mean, you live in California, your vote in the presidential election is meaningless.
And Giancana is long gone, so, I don't know what the answer is, Larry. But the thing is, which of them could beat Hillary? Mm-hmm. Which one of them is strong enough, skilled enough, and appealing enough?
Which one do you think?
Really, man to man, just having a coffee with each other in a coffee shop in Queens or Las Vegas? I don't think Carson has the horsepower. Not at all. I think he's too soft-spoken. I think she'll eat him for lunch. So who's next? Cruz? Cruz is a smart man. He's an able man. He's got good ideas. He doesn't have the appeal necessary to be president. Rubio? Rubio is a kid. He looks like a boy. Hillary will turn him into a boy. I don't think any of them can beat her other than Trump. Trump will give her a run for her money.
So since you've been preaching this, how do you concede the fact that Hillary looks like the favorite to be the next president, Why isn't your voice more powerful?
It's not my voice. I'm just a small radio talk show host and an author of best-selling books. We don't count very much.
Why not?
We have a loyal audience, but we don't really play that strongly in terms of politics. You know and I know what politics is about. It's about the media, the media, the media. She owns the media. They never ask her a tough question. They never ask her the real hard questions, which I don't want to go into now because it's not a crucifixion of Hillary that we're talking about. She owns the media. They're friendly to her. They don't give her any hard questions, number one. Number two, and here's the real issue, no one listens to us in radio and the media. Those of us in the media who don't support the liberal line are generally castigated, pushed aside, and called marginal names, Larry. I'm surprised the interview's been so nice so far.
Stay right there. More with Michael Savage after the break. Well, I've always been fair, Michael. Come on.
You have.
I try to ask good questions. I try to elicit answers. You're a good guest.
Larry, question. I remember years ago when I did the book tours I told you about on my health books in the 70s. You were very famous. I came in your studio in Washington. I don't know if there's a waste of time for you. And I said, did you read my book? And you said, I never read a book before the interview.
Right. I try to learn so that the audience would buy the book.
And I ask the guy I'm interviewing or the woman questions that I would ask that a normal listener would ask. Is that still your interviewing technique?
Correct.
I copied it from you when I have guests on. Don't
it
think
works
I can learn
because
from you.
if the guest wants to get a point across, if you've read the book, you're ahead of the audience. I don't want to be ahead of the audience.
Well, that's why you're very good at what you do, and I really appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about what I mean by government zero. It's easy to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not calling for no government. I'm saying let's have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not a government of the lobbyists, by the lobbyists, and for the lobbyists. How do you, Larry, quick point, Rubio, take a guess who's supporting him. Big Republican in Las Vegas who owns the hotels.
I know.
Mr. Edelman.
Right.
And who supports him on the Democrat side? Big Democrat billionaire, Larry Ellison. So you got billionaire Democrat, billionaire Republican supporting the same candidate. Why? It's simple. What do they both want from the Schmendrick from Miami? They want one thing from him.
What?
They want as many H-1B visas as they can get, and they want as many laborers as they can get for the hotels on the side of Edelman, in my opinion. Got to keep the hotels running. And then they want cheaper labor in Silicon Valley. They'd rather throw the American worker under the bus.
You mean Adelson, I think.
Adelson, sorry. Yeah. Wonderful man.
Well, you're pro-Israel. He's very pro-Israel.
I never met the man. I'm not a billionaire.
You're close, Michael.
I'm not in the billionaires club.
How do you explain? You're very Jewish. How do you explain that the Jews vote Democratic?
Well, there was a head
back to Roosevelt, doesn't it?
There was the head of the Jewish Defense League 30 years ago who died in prison under suspicious circumstances. I think he was whacked. And he was Erwin Rubin. You may have interviewed him years ago. Big guy. He actually went on some shows where there were Nazis and skinheads, and he got into fistfights with them on stage. He threw them off the stage. He was a powerful kind of guy, the kind of guy who would have led people in rebellion against the Nazis in the woods. A great big man.
I didn't meet him.
Wonderful man. He made a statement before he died. He said, how come my people are so smart in business, science, law, medicine, and so stupid when it comes to their own survival? How come they support a president who's the most anti-Israel president in history, Barack Obama, blindly supporting him like blind mice? I don't have an answer other than one, Larry, a book I wrote in 2006. Liberalism is a mental disorder.
Well, Barack Obama sells more arms to Israel than Bush and Clinton combined.
Sells?
Well, we've always sold them arms. We don't give them arms. We sell it. Israel has that. They buy it.
I'm a supporter of Israel up to a point, Larry. Israel doesn't come first for me. America comes first. And I got to tell you this. In my book, Government Zero, I call for the elimination of all foreign aid, including aid to Israel. It's time for us to stop funding wars around the world, and it's time for us to draw our wagons and support our own nation and our own people. And I love Israel, but you know what? We cannot have them as a let us say, surrogate state for the rest of our existence.
So we can't label you, Michael.
You can try. My mother had a name for me.
What was it?
I'm not going to tell you. She's in heaven. She's in heaven cooking for God. I'm not going to say what she said.
You didn't like John Boehner either, did you?
Oh. Well, I had an affectionate name for him. We called him Clink on the Savage Nation, and that referred to the ice as it hit the bottom of the glass.
So as we sum this up on the political end, Michael, you're saying if Trump doesn't get the nomination, Hillary is the next president.
That's my opinion. He's the only one who has a chance of, he has the guts to stand up to her and challenge her. Now, what's interesting about that, Larry, without going into a big tangent, is that he had been a Democrat for many years, and I think that they're friends, their families.
I know
friends.
Donald forever. I like Donald very much.
Wonderful guy. I mean,
he is.
And he's miscast by the media. You know that.
I like Donald. He's got an enormous ego, but he's a good guy. He's got a big heart, by the way. He's very good to people. He's very kind to people.
People don't know that.
Employees like him.
Employees like him. He's a very multi-ethnic, although he's Presbyterian by religion. His daughter converted to Judaism, married an Orthodox guy. There's no bigotry in that family.
None.
And yet they paint him as some right-wing, fascist simply because he loves America a little too much. No, who can win other than him? Carly Fiorina? Don't think so. No. Not with that hairdo, Larry.
But Rubio could be another Obama, a freshman senator.
My wife likes him. I said, what do you like about him? She said, I don't know. He's fresh-faced.
This I got to ask you. What happened to Jeb Bush?
I don't think he was ever able to get out from under his brother's name, number one. We had 8 years. What? How many? 16 years? 12 years of the
12.
Bush. Right? 12. We didn't want another 4 to 8. We had the experiment already. That's why we don't need Clinton. We had 8 years of her. But what happened? Couldn't get out from the name Bush. Also, he played it too close to the middle. He was not willing to take any real positions. He lost too much weight. He went to too many advisors. I like Chris Christie. By the way, I like that man. I think he's a wonderful guy. In terms of persona, he's very underrated. I don't know why he's not getting anywhere. Former prosecutor. No, what is he? Former U.S. attorney?
Yeah.
Or former U.S. attorney, I think, or prosecutor.
Maybe it's the title of that great Arthur Miller play, View from the Bridge.
Bridgegate did it, huh?
Probably. I don't think he's ever gotten through that.
Maybe you're right. But, I looked at those men and women on the stage during the debate last week, and all I thought of was what a wonderful cabinet they would make for a Donald Trump presidency. Carson could run the health department, Health and Human Services. Who would be a great head of DHS? Christie, as a former prosecutor or U.S. attorney. Every one of the people on that stage brought something that would be wonderful for America, in my opinion.
The Trump cabinet.
The Trump cabinet. And I told Trump when he wins, I want only one thing. I want to run the NIH, and I want to clean up science in America so we can get rid of the global baloney.
Michael, thanks for joining us. Always good seeing you, man.
I'll see you in 30 years, Larry.
Michael Savage. The book is Government Zero. No borders, no language, no culture. It's available everywhere. We thank him for joining me on this edition of Politicking. Remember, you can join the conversation on my Facebook page. Share your thoughts on Twitter by tweeting at King's Things. Use the Politicking hashtag. And don't forget, check out the Politicking blog on our homepage. That's all for this edition of Politicking.